Wendy Williams just made an announcement that nobody saw coming. She and Ricky Gervais are joining forces to expose Ellen DeGeneres and to shine a light on exactly how Ellen was involved in silencing people who dared to speak out. Ellen's show ran for 19 years, and during that entire run, both Ricky and Wendy claim she was working against them behind the scenes. This is how they're finally pushing back. Ricky Gervais hosted the Golden Globe Awards 5 times between 2010 and 2020, but it was his final appearance that truly rattled the industry. Standing in front of every major producer, director, actor, and music executive in Hollywood, Ricky looked out at that room and told them he knew. He knew they were all connected to Jeffrey Epstein. This was in 2020, a full 5 years before the Department of Justice would release any official information about the case. When asked what made him decide to go that far, Ricky was straightforward about it. He said he wasn't there to entertain the 200 most privileged people in the room. He was there for the 200 million people watching from home, the ones who weren't winning awards, who weren't millionaires. In his mind, it wasn't even a difficult choice. If Hollywood was going to make their awards show a spectator sport, then the people watching deserved something real. And this wasn't the first time Ricky had taken aim at powerful figures in the industry. During one of his stand-up specials, he went after the BBC directly, one of the biggest sponsors behind these very award shows. He wasn't subtle about it either. He knew what he was implying, and he said it anyway. Ricky has always been open about the fact that speaking out carried real risk. He understood what calling out powerful predators could do to his career. But unlike most of the people sitting in that room, he didn't let that stop him. At the time, many people laughed it off. But if you look closely at the footage from that night, the people Ricky was naming weren't laughing. Their faces told a completely different story. Ricky has described his approach as that of a court jester, someone who stands with the audience, not with the powerful. He didn't dress like them, act like them, or think like them. He walked out on that stage with a beer in his hand, deliberately positioning himself as the outsider. Because that, he said, was exactly what the moment called for. The moment Ricky connected Jeffrey Epstein to the people in that room by name, the audience went silent. Shortly after, he was banned from the Golden Globes and has never been invited back. But 5 years later, the release of the Epstein files confirmed what he had said. Flight logs and emails released by the Department of Justice showed that nearly all of the major studios and production houses had ties to Epstein. In some cases, Epstein presented himself as a recruiter, luring models and child stars to his private island in Little St. James under the guise of auditions. Wendy Williams was another voice that refused to stay quiet, and she has paid an enormous price for it. When Ellen announced she was ending her show, the entertainment world reacted as though something precious had been lost. Celebrities lined up to express their sadness. But Wendy Williams was the only one who stood up for Ellen's employees, the people who had come forward with allegations of a toxic work environment. Wendy said plainly that Ellen had a dark side the industry was working hard to conceal. 18 or 19 years on television, she said, doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are. Wendy had experienced this firsthand. She had been a guest on Ellen's show, and by her own account, she was not happy with how she was treated. What made it worse was what happened on air. Ellen actually threatened Wendy, live, on national television, framed as a joke so the audience would laugh along. But Wendy knew what it was. It wasn't a punchline. It was a warning. Wendy had dealt with threats before. When she began exposing Diddy and other music executives for taking advantage of young stars like Usher and Justin Bieber, Diddy came onto her show and used her son as leverage. The moment he brought up her son, Wendy's entire demeanor changed. Anyone watching could see it. That was the industry sending her a message. Her history of speaking out went back decades. In 1998, a call Wendy made while on air at Hot 97 got her fired. She had been making claims about closeted figures in the music industry, claims that were considered outrageous at the time. When Howard Stern brought it up years later in 2006, Wendy neither confirmed nor denied why she was let go. She simply smiled and let the silence say everything. Then in 2017, Diddy appeared on her show. Nearly 20 years had passed since the incident that cost her that radio job. And yet, right there on camera, Diddy casually mentioned that he had met Wendy's teenage son backstage. The shift in Wendy's body language was immediate. Anyone familiar with what she'd been through understood exactly what that moment meant. Wendy Williams spent years as the undisputed queen of daytime television. Her unfiltered commentary and willingness to say what other hosts wouldn't made her a force in the industry. Celebrities were genuinely afraid of her Hot Topic segment because nothing was ever truly off limits. But in recent years, all of that has been stripped away. Wendy has been placed in a conservatorship, confined to a facility, and reportedly given medication she never consented to. All, she says, because she refused to stay quiet. Medical evaluations, ordered by her own court-appointed legal team, have since found that Wendy does not have frontotemporal dementia. She never did. It was the diagnosis used to justify taking control of her life, and it has now been called into question. Her family has spoken out, saying that despite everything, Wendy sounds exactly like herself. Quirky, eccentric, the same person she has always been. Wendy was one of the earliest voices to warn the public about what was happening to young boys in the music industry and how parents were knowingly leaving their children with people who had dangerous reputations. She claimed the parents were aware of what they were agreeing to. At the time, these were statements that got her ridiculed, blacklisted, and eventually silenced. But the Epstein files changed everything. The same figures who once held enormous power in the industry are now scrambling. Ellen is currently in the United Kingdom and, by many accounts, does not plan to return. Others are quietly leaving as well. And the legal pressure is mounting. More than 100 lawsuits have been filed against Diddy alone by his victims. Among the newly released Epstein documents, Hollywood talent agent Casey Wasserman was exposed through suggestive emails he had exchanged with Ghislaine Maxwell. Wasserman, who had flown on Epstein's private plane in 2002 as part of a Clinton Foundation delegation, wrote to Maxwell in early 2003 asking what it would take to see her in a leather outfit. Maxwell responded with an offer of a private massage. Following the release of those messages, Wasserman announced the sale of his agency, which represented thousands of athletes, performers, and celebrities. He acknowledged he had become a distraction. The cost of speaking out has been devastating for many people. Wendy Williams lost her freedom, but some who came forward paid an even greater price. Two witnesses named in proceedings against Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, Carolyn Andriano and Lee Patrick, both died of accidental overdoses 6 years apart. Carolyn had been recruited by Epstein at just 14 years old. Her mother described her daughter as a woman who never fully recovered from what she experienced inside Epstein's mansion, someone who would vanish for long stretches out of shame. Carolyn left behind 5 children. Her mother couldn't sleep in her own bedroom afterward, surrounded by reminders of the daughter she lost. But the Epstein files changed everything. The same figures who once held enormous power in the industry are now scrambling. Ellen is currently in the United Kingdom and, by many accounts, does not plan to return. Others are quietly leaving as well. And the legal pressure is mounting. More than 100 lawsuits have been filed against Diddy alone by his victims. Among the newly released Epstein documents, Hollywood talent agent Casey Wasserman was exposed through suggestive emails he had exchanged with Ghislaine Maxwell. Wasserman, who had flown on Epstein's private plane in 2002 as part of a Clinton Foundation delegation, wrote to Maxwell in early 2003 asking what it would take to see her in a leather outfit. Maxwell responded with an offer of a private massage. Following the release of those messages, Wasserman announced the sale of his agency, which represented thousands of athletes, performers, and celebrities. He acknowledged he had become a distraction. The cost of speaking out has been devastating for many people. Wendy Williams lost her freedom, but some who came forward paid an even greater price. Two witnesses named in proceedings against Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, Carolyn Andriano and Lee Patrick, both died of accidental overdoses 6 years apart. Carolyn had been recruited by Epstein at just 14 years old. Her mother described her daughter as a woman who never fully recovered from what she experienced inside Epstein's mansion, someone who would vanish for long stretches out of shame. Carolyn left behind 5 children. Her mother couldn't sleep in her own bedroom afterward, surrounded by reminders of the daughter she lost. Right now, Wendy is fighting to regain her freedom. The court-ordered medical evaluation has confirmed what her family has been saying all along. The dementia diagnosis was never real. Wendy herself says she is being held against her will. Her niece recently flew in from Miami to see her, and footage captured the two of them navigating what should have been a simple family visit. Complicated by the facility's restrictions, security calls, and a guardianship that her legal team is now actively challenging. Investigative journalists have begun picking up the story as well. The pressure on Hollywood is building, and Wendy Williams is determined to be heard. If this story matters to you, leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you want to stay updated as this situation develops, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. This is far from over.